Hello and welcome back to Build Mode. We are currently back in the studio cooking up our next season, so we wanted to share our very first episode with Deon Nicholas, the founder and CEO of Forethought AI. And this was a great conversation about finding product market fit and some early failures that helped Deon and the team grow. And since we last spoke with Deon, some exciting news. Forethought has been acquired by Zendesk. So huge congratulations to the team, and they now join more than 250 other Startup Battlefield alumni who have successfully exited. Okay, please enjoy my conversation with Deon. Good to see you again.
Oh, good to see you as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you on an episode of Build Mode. Thank you for joining us. So can you just kick things off by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about how you got here?
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm Deon. I'm the co-founder and chairman over at Forethought. We build the most advanced AI agents for customer service, customer experience, and beyond. We founded the company 8 years ago at this point, launched, I think, close to exactly 7 years ago at TechCrunch Disrupt. And yeah, we've been growing. And so we started, before the AI boom, so to speak. But I've always been fascinated with AI and have just believed in the technology and what it can do for customers and consumers. And yeah, I was the founding CEO for 7 years of the company. We raised over 115 million in venture capital, serve really large companies all the way from Airtable to HashiCorp to Cotopaxi. Yeah, the business just keeps on going to new levels, new heights, and just like, I don't know, in many ways, the founder journey changes every 6 to 9 months, so to speak.
Interesting. Well, let's just get
Let's
right into
dive in,
that. What do
yeah.
you mean that it changes every 6 to 9 months?
Well, so I've said this like in kind of like back in the early days, but in some senses, the business, if you're in like a hyper growth, hyperscale startup, you actually want the company to tangibly feel different every 6 to 9 months, right? And so, in a sense, in the early days when we just launched, it was like four of us, me, my co-founder, and just like a couple folks. And the jobs you do and what's the most critical problem for the business changes every 6 to 9 months. And that's roughly like the time frame where if you can get everyone together, rally behind whatever your OKR, your goal, your BHAG, as people say, your big, hairy, audacious goal. I don't even know if people say that anymore. That's not a thing.
I love it.
That's
No,
not a thing.
I don't know, but it should be a thing.
It used to be. That was, in all those those textbooks. And so you as humans, as founders, as builders have to be changing and evolving as much as the company is.
It's interesting. And I mean, you have to have many skills in your toolbox or tools in your toolbox, if you will, and be willing to adapt. I mean, I see a lot of founders who are, I'm the technical co-founder and I'm the business co-founder. But in the early days, I mean, you have to kind of be everything.
The meta learning or the meta skill is the ability to learn anything. So prior to starting Forethought, I had worked or interned at a bunch of big companies like Meta, Palantir, Dropbox. And then before that, I had, went to school in Waterloo in Canada and had studied also AI at the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. But the reason I bring that up is because when I first started Forethought, I first started in this like motion of company building, I started looking at what were the best CEOs that I had seen doing. And, I'd been fortunate enough to work even as an intern at places like Facebook, now Meta, I guess we call it, and Dropbox. And I would listen to interviews of Mark Zuckerberg and Drew Houston. And one in particular with Drew Houston, where he was kind of asked this question, like, what's his secret? He approaches every problem like an engineering problem because he's an engineer by training and, and all of that. He's like, well, if I can learn engineering, I can learn how to do marketing, and there are textbooks on this, there are textbooks on that, there are experts. And so really this like beginner's mindset to just about everything has felt like an unlock for me. It's actually one of the things that made me feel like, okay, I can do this. Like I would hear these, CEOs speak about what their superpower is. And I'm like, I think I can do that, right? Like if learning is the game, you don't have to know everything up front, but you have to be willing to adapt.
Yeah, CEOs are human too.
Yeah, exactly.
If they can do it, why can't I, right?
Yeah.
Dropbox is also a Startup Battlefield alumni. Did you know that when you were
That is
when you ended up at Battlefield?
No, I did not. But it all works out.
Full circle. Full circle.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do a little bit of time traveling here. So take us back to day zero. How did the idea for Forethought come about?
So I don't think there was a specific catalyst or day when I was just like, yo, this is it. So like, let's go way back. I learned to code when I was younger. I grew up in Canada. And I grew up in Toronto, kind of inner city Toronto, learned to code, and that was kind of like my escape, like in a sense. Like it was just like what I would do as like a thing that I just found fun and curious and passionate about. And at the University of Alberta, there's a machine learning lab called Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. It's one of the like top 4 AI labs in the country. I was an intern there. I ended up interning in high school. So I think the point is this, like, I started learning about the concept of AI a long time ago, right? And for me, being a builder and just like a curious person, I was just excited about what was possible. I was in school at the time, obviously, and like I had these ideas. I was like, can AI be my personal tutor? Like,
Yes, it can.
yes, it can. Now it can, exactly. And so I just like had these questions about what the technology was capable of. And that kind of created this interest in me throughout probably the next like, decade thereafter. And in particular, I was fascinated with natural language AI, right? AI that can understand text, help you with concepts and things like that. And so this was kind of this thread in my life. So when I went to University of Waterloo, I took a bunch of AI classes and things like that. When Coursera became a thing, I started, taking the online natural language processing courses with Chris Manning. And so I think that was like this evolution for me on the technology side or on the technological side. And then the real day zero for me was probably, I would say, middle of 2017. A few, kind of groundbreaking natural language processing papers had come out. Stanford had just published the Stanford question answer data set or something like that.
Sounds fun.
It sounds fancy, but it was a data set on literally documents with questions and the answer. Like every row of this database was just like question about a document and what is the correct answer. And this was like the largest data set of its time. It was like 100,000 data points. And because I was just so fascinated and constantly like thinking about these problems, I was like, hey, this is like looks like the beginning of something really cool. Like the technology that I'd wanted since I was a kid, or I guess since I was in high school, is finally starting to, come to fruition. And so I started really tinkering with the technology in 2017, and then started to ask myself, well, if this is true, if this is going to be a big technological wave, where is it going to be applied? And because I had worked at a bunch of big companies, I realized, well, for these companies, their secret sauce is not necessarily their technology, it's their customers. Oftentimes, you're spending a lot of time and energy making sure not only do you grow customer base, but you retain them. Started to really marry these two ideas of like this technology I find interesting. Quite literally, I know this is probably like a bad way to build a startup, but I was just like, I like it. And I think there are problems that can be solved to help businesses with their customers. And that was like it. It wasn't like a very specific day or moment, but it was like this evolution of ideas. And then as I started getting pulled more into like this, like, oh, entrepreneurship is kind of fun and cool, I was like, all right, I think I can actually build a company around this.
So let's talk a little bit about, so now you've set the stage for, you have the technology you're passionate about, and you have sort of a general scope of you want to solve B2B problems, right?
Yes.
Enterprise problems.
Yes, exactly.
And so I was at Disrupt a couple weeks ago now talking to a founder who, was clearly a domain expert. They're passionate about helping people. And of course, I asked them, who is your target customer? And they didn't quite have the idea, they didn't quite know yet.
Yeah.
And so I think we see this a lot where people want to get their hands dirty and build first,
Yep.
ask questions later.
Ask questions later.
But so how did you go about then finding who exactly and what exact problem you were going to solve?
Yeah. So I like to think about a startup as both like your idea is a combination of what is the problem, who is the problem for, and what is the solution to that problem. And I think a lot of technical founders actually come often solution oriented. By the way, I think it's actually the worst way to come to build a startup, because what ends up mattering the most is, are you building something people love and are you truly solving a problem for those people? So I think I either got lucky or like had enough imposter syndrome to keep like asking myself the question, what do great CEOs do? And I came across YC's startup school, and they have like a bunch of videos. In the school, it's Sam Altman, who's now, OpenAI guy. But like it is just like these are good videos. And the ethos was always build something people want. Build something people want. And that was just like kind of like you get beat over the head with it. And so in the end, what I started to realize as I listened again, how did Mark Zuckerberg think about these things? How did Drew Houston think about these things? What are the YC folks saying? You start to see these common themes. And the common theme is that the technology, again, it's important. It can be an unlocker. It's part of the solution. But what's more critical is, who are you solving it for and what is the problem? And most of the early days of a startup from zero to like before get to a series A or a million, that's the only thing that matters. It's the product market fit, knowing your ideal customer profile. And so that started to like get ingrained in me because I was in some ways terrified of like, what are all the things people do wrong? And I don't want to do all of those things wrong. And so, okay, I started to realize, all right, it's all about the ideal customer profile. It's all about knowing who is your user. Another really good book was The Lean Startup, and it was all the rage for a while. And I think most people who found it cool didn't actually read it. But like, there was like a very clear, like, here are the 10 to 20 things you can do to find your initial MVP and customer. So this is like, late 2017. I generally have a technology, then solution, but I don't yet know the product and the problem. I also know in general, I want to do consumer customer experience somewhere in that world, but I don't know what it is yet. And so what I do is, or what we did was we just started talking to users. So while we were talking to VCs about potentially fundraising, things like that, just learning that world. Literally, anytime somebody said no to us on the fundraising side, we would just ask for an intro to an operator at a company. And so we started to like slowly build out this network of COOs, VPs of engineering, VPs of support, heads of sales at these companies, and literally just talk to them. We would ask that we had a little bit of a demo because we had built enough of the technology at the time, which was again this question answering based on like those models that had just started to come out, kind of like a mini GPT, but like probably not as cool. And so we just had the inklings of that technology, and that was about enough code to where we were like, let's stop writing code and let's just spend time with users. So we would show people a demo. Depending on the user, it'd be a different demo, and we would literally try and poke at what is the key pain. So at that time, we talked to heads of HR because, we thought, could this technology be used for internal employee questions where, if employees have questions about benefits or the Wi-Fi or the pass, whatever, this is probably where it could be used. We talked to heads of support. Could this technology be used to help customer service agents get access to information more quickly or help customers on the other end of that get their questions answered more quickly? We talked to heads of sales, helping sales reps. We literally just spend a ton of time talking. And then the other part of that was listening, right? And so it's not just about talking to your users; it's literally about listening to your users. And I think the dirty secret or whatever is that everyone is actually really nice. Like it's a good thing, especially
That's such a dirty secret.
dirty secret.
People learn oscillate.
No, like it's part of why startups fail. Is like everyone is really nice. Nobody wants to tell you your baby's ugly. Is really what I mean. In that, don't listen to never like ask the question, hey, here's this cool idea that I like. Do you like it also? Because everyone's gonna be like, yeah, this is really cool. I could see how somebody would get value from this. It's awesome. And so I learned like pretty quickly, and I don't know, maybe it's that like weird paranoia, but like this, like, am I building something that is truly solving a pain point for people? And so we would talk to heads of HR and they'd be like, oh, this is really cool. I could see how somebody would get value from this. Talk to me when you have something related to recruiting. Like, I would talk to heads of sales and be like, this is really cool, but talk to me when you have something that can like help me generate revenue. And then we talked to heads of support and they were like, okay, hold on one second. Are you sure this is real? Because I have a team of engineers working on this right now. And if you can actually do what your demo just said, then I will just redeploy them on something else and give you that money. It was like a shut up and take my money moment. And so we had the inklings of this vision of Forethought, which would be this, intelligence layer that could pull in all this information and then ultimately embed into these workflows, right? And I actually think, ironically, now that the company is much bigger, we started in customer service, we started in customer experience, and we're actually branching out to all of these other workflows, which is fascinating. But finding that first killer use case where somebody wasn't like, wow, this is nice, I could see how it could be interesting, it's a cool demo, to like, I have a pain right now that I have been trying to solve for. And then we would talk to people and be like, oh, well, haven't you used AI for this? Well, we've tried chatbots and it just didn't work. And we could just feel that annoyance on their face when they're just like, it just doesn't work. And so their big question for us wasn't even like, is this cool? Is like, does this actually work, or are you kidding me? Like, you know what I mean? And that was where we could start to feel this market pull. That's where we could start to feel that we were talking to people who had a real pain, and we started to dive deeper. And that's how we found our initial customer profile. It was, high growth companies who have tons of customer questions and they need help. Like they want to increase their customer experience while reducing cost, while still growing. And it's this equation that's very hard to solve without AI.
Really interesting. And I mean, even you've said a few times, right, that this was sort of the backwards way to build a company is to start with the solution and the tech. I'm curious how so you built different demos for each of those audiences, HR, sales, whatever, before you got to customer success.
Yeah.
How much effort did you or resources did you put into building those demos, or what would you advise founders to do in that position? Really, because it sounds like it's very resource intensive.
Actually, nowadays you vibe code it.
Yeah.
I guess the way to describe it was what I would say today is like de-risk your business. What is the like highest risk part of the business, and actually focus on that first. And so even just before for us customers was, would the technology work? And so we spent a fair bit of time building our core engine, which was recurrent neural networks, which were a form of neural network that could do this kind of language-based modeling. And so we spent a little bit of time just like building a core thing that could ingest one support article and answer questions about that one support article. And that was actually our demo. And then what we ended up doing was kind of like building skins on top of it. Where does it live? What's the user experience? And that, like in some cases, it was Figma faked. Like, you know what I mean? In some cases, it was just like a little Slack integration. In some cases, it was a little email integration. And so I would actually advise founders to like do what Lean Startup calls the concierge test, where like, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if there's a human under the hood, right? Like as long as the user thinks there's an experience there, and you could be hand holding them through the whole thing. If they don't get value even from that, then you're just solving the wrong problem, right? So then don't go spend time like writing code to automate something that doesn't matter. And so we ran these little like MVPs. Another silly example of how to do that is, I think it was Robinhood in the early days. Before they wrote a line of code, they put out a landing page. They put out landing pages to test, like, is it, investing for free? Is it this, like, what are the value propositions that people would pay for? And I think their landing page ended up getting like tens of thousands of people. And they're like, now we know what to go build.
Yeah, just basic A/B test.
Like basically, literally A/B test it. So the minimum, I would actually be lazy. I would say do the least amount of engineering work possible to prove whatever it is that you're trying to prove. For us, it was, does the technology work? So there was real research and engineering work that went into that, probably for like 3 to 4 months of just building. And then, beyond that, it was like the next proof point is, where's the pain that we're solving? So then we just, did what needed to be done there.
Okay, so at this point, let's take a little recap.
Yep.
So we have a technology, okay?
Yep.
We found a customer.
Yep.
We have now identified their problem, whether this is the order that we advise or not, but it worked for you, and that's what we're here to talk about.
You got there somehow.
We got there somehow. And so now we're here. So how did you then go about sort of iterating on the product to build based on what your ICP now is asking for?
So yeah, this is like late 2017. So at this point, we have our initial kind of prototype that we use for demoing. We know our core customer, and we actually use it for fundraising too. And so we end up raising like, I don't know, like 500K of like a pre-seed round. And so then basically we start trying to like lock in and like get our first paying customer. And so, again, it was from all these no's we got from VCs. We were like, I'm like, all right, fine. You won't give me your money, but like, introduce me to someone. You want to be value add?
Put your money where your mouth is, or put your Rolodex where your mouth is.
Exactly. It's like, I don't care. I got like dozens, if not, like, I think I still have the old spreadsheet of like how many no's I got from VCs, right? And that's a whole nother story. But either way, it's like, all right, put your ego aside. Like, let's just get to work. And so we end up meeting the CEO of a tech company. He sees our demo and he's like, this looks really cool. I'm going to introduce you to the head of support. And the head of support, again, has that reaction of like, literally, we have a team that like, we've been trying to solve this problem for a while. And so what we ended up doing was trying to replicate this, finding additional kind of companies where we could see there's a real problem. But B, we just started building. We said, look, we're an early stage startup. What you've seen in the demo is real. Like, at least the engine is real. All the skins and stuff is like, well, don't worry about that. But we know the core tech is real. And it was pretty magical. It was like, we would literally ask people, you pick a document. Like, it could be a Wikipedia article. We called it our Oprah demo because we would always kind of seed it with just like, oh, let's pick a random Wikipedia article. Let's try Oprah Winfrey. And it would work. Like, and then they'd be like, wow, that worked. And it sounds like kind of random. And it was like, what, random? And
you trained your model on Oprah's Wikipedia.
We literally trained our model on Oprah Winfrey's Wikipedia page. It became our Oprah demo. It was like a staple of forethought for a very long time. And then we would ask you, be like, okay, you pick a topic now. So any other Wikipedia page, your company's website, whatever, people would do like the San Francisco 49ers, but they would see that the technology works. They would ask a question and it would just work. And it's a random topic that you chose. And so there was a little bit of this magic moment where people were like, if this technology really worked, like I could see how it could apply here. So that gave us enough credibility to be like, okay, well, we're still early, but are you willing to take a bet on us? And so we would ask people, we'll build a version of this for you that sits inside your help center, like your Zendesk or your Salesforce, that your customer service agents can use. And again, we went the lean startup route. I was like, what is a minimum necessary product to prove value here? And we're not going to do anything more than that. And so we created a text-based app, which was anytime a support ticket comes up in Zendesk, as a private comment, the agent would just see a little note from the AI, from Forethought. At the time, we called our AI Agatha, which was just like long story on branding. But anyway, you get this little note from Agatha, which was like a suggested answer, and that was it. There's no UI there. It's just text and the avatar. And it just shows up. It was integrated, embedded into your workflow. So if you're a support agent, you're on tickets every day, and you just see this little text. And if it's nice, you use it, and if it's not, you don't. And then we wrote code to check how much of our answer did they use. What, right? If they copy pasted, made some edits, we called it the edit distance. Like, you know what I mean? And that was it. Like, think about how many lines of code that would be. Not many, right? We focused hard on the core engine, but like that simple use case. And so we would sign companies up and we'd say, hey, look, would you be up for like a 3-month pilot, a paid pilot? And because I was just deathly terrified of like, this has to be something valuable to you. I'm not building something that's not valuable to you. And so in this case, you should pay. And it's not even that it was about the money. Our first paid pilots were like $3,000 or something like that. But it's about, is this something they'd be willing to pay for? And at the enterprise, you have to, loop in your security team anytime you have a new vendor, go through legal contracts, even to approve like $1,000 purchase for like a giant enterprise. And that's when we knew like we were onto something, because they were like, yeah, okay, we'll do it. Like, let's just get this done. And that was like the beginning of 2018. And then we found out we got into TechCrunch, this route, which is really cool.
Okay, well, before we get into that whole shebang, so at what point in all of this would you say that you had this sort of aha moment of finding product market fit? I feel like people describe it like falling in love. They're like, you'll just know. At what point did you know?
I know this is going to go out to way too many people on this podcast, but I feel like we didn't know or feel like we had product market fit for a few years. And maybe the reason is like we now we're solving for the right user, the right ideal customer profile. But in many ways, we actually ended up solving a slightly adjacent problem. And the reason I say that is because in the end, and today, our most popular product is actually the AI chatbot that just solves customer problems, right? It's a chatbot. Like we all know, we think of GPT, we think of this whole market, and you think chatbot. And we now have voice and all this stuff. But the first product we built was our Agent Assist, which was more of a co-pilot tool. And, I don't know if the distinction really matters that much net, but if you think about it from like just the builders and the company arc perspective, the technology wasn't necessarily ready yet to be just like deployed to people's websites. So it might have been the exact right decision path, but it didn't ever feel like the thing just blew up and took off, especially because it's hard to measure agent productivity. And so at that world, you're hoping that agents love it. You're hoping that they feel more productive, or you can A/B test or find some way of improving productivity. And we were able to do that. And that's how we actually landed our first few customers. But if I'm being, frank, it didn't feel like we caught fire in that sense.
So last time we spoke, you were telling me about your 7 failure rule to finding product market fit.
Yes.
And it sounded like a magical magical number. How did you end up at 7, and tell us about that?
Okay, so I have 2 rules of product. The first is this. The first thing that happens when you launch a product is nobody uses it. Okay?
Great.
That is rule number 1. And the second rule is that any product is within 7 iterations of a successful product. These are all made up. Like it's just like all the numbers are made up. But it's like weirdly freeing, and I think actually more accurate to think this way, because most founders, I myself am the same way. I used to be this way. Like if you have like a lot of cool ideas, you're like, I like this technology, da da da. You end up thinking if you build it, they will come. Like you just build it, you launch the product, and everyone's going to come. And, so what ends up happening is you build the product that would exist if you had like a million users. Let's take like a social network, for example. When I was at Facebook, Meta, I was thinking about social networks and just like kind of the dynamics of that. If you were to launch a social network, or if you ask a founder who's building a social product, the first thing they'll show you is the feed and like all of the features that assume there are users on the app. But the truth is that the first thing that happens when you launch, if you were to launch a new social network, is nobody uses it. And so you would have to build a single player version of the app or something that has utility for that core audience before you build the version of the app that has a million users. And that's true. That cold start problem is actually true in like every industry. And it's also kind of goes back to this like launch, go talk to your users. That's really all that matters. And you actually don't know beforehand what the behaviors of the users are going to be. And so it's like this like weirdly freeing mantra I have. I mean, I made it up. It's fake, but like it's like something I tell founders all the time, which is like, look, if you knew that you were within 7 iterations of the right product, what would you do? And you know that the first product you launch is not going to work. And I think it really changes your mentality and focuses you back on that kind of lean startup mentality of like, I need to get in front of users. I don't know my users better than they know themselves, but I can be a better listener. I can learn and like iterate and build and repeat. So that's kind of like my approach to finding product market fit, so to speak.
Yeah, no, but that's interesting. And I think it must be really freeing, right? Because I know a lot of founders, and I hear this all the time, that, their company is their baby and they're so protective of it. And I don't want to launch it to the world until it is perfect, right? But what does perfect mean? And knowing that, I'm going to allow myself 7 iterations of this, 7 whatever failures. I don't like putting it as failures, but 7 iterations before I even expect myself to, or our company to get there. And I think that, yeah, can lift a lot of founder anxiety, which is what we're aiming to do here today.
Here we go. It's build mode.
It is build mode. So let's talk a little bit about launch while we're at it. So now you've gone through your 7 iterations, you have your customer, you have your product. When did you know you were ready to show it to the world?
It was interesting. So I will say even before launch, right? The worst thing you can do is like pre-launch, not show it to anyone. So again, we were still in this very much like the only thing that matters is kind of customer love. Build something that people love. Are you solving a true pain point? The technology is cool. We're all technologists. Let's not fall into that trap. So we found out we applied to TechCrunch Disrupt Battlefield. We found out we got in. We were one of the finalists. We were so excited. And it was like, oh my gosh, we're going to launch on stage. We're going to, have a news article written about us. I'm going to tell my mom we're on TV. Like, you know what I mean? Like we were very excited, to say the least. And so I think we found out in like, I don't know, maybe like April 2018. And then the actual launch day was going to be September 5th, 2018. Don't ask how I remember those, but they're
very specific.
I just remember that like it was just
3 p.m. on the Disrupt stage.
The Disrupt stage. And these things are very like meaningful to me because like we incorporated in September of 2017. So it was like almost exactly a year was like the, launch day. And so we get in and again, this goes back to this, I'm probably beating a dead horse, but this concept of like product market fit and this concept of user love where like, I'm like, okay, this is cool. Our egos will be super inflated. We're going to be so hot. Like, wow. But it all came back for me to like, nothing matters unless you have customer. And so what I told the team was like, all right, guys, we're going to go launch a TechCrunch Disrupt. And we're going to put together a slide. We're going to put together a pitch and all of that. But there's only one slide that I want everyone on this team to care about. And that was our logo slide. By the time we get to TechCrunch Disrupt, I want to have 5 logos on that slide of customers who are paid pilots, who like us enough to let us use their logo at TechCrunch Disrupt. And I was like, that is the team's goal. Yeah. And at the time we had a half, like we had just signed that one and it hadn't even launched yet. And that was in some ways as invigorating as like getting into Disrupt itself, like the focus that created. And it was focused in a lot of ways, right? Because like we were pitching, practicing our speech. My co-founder, Sammy, and I were like grilling each other on judge Q&A questions, like everything about the business, which locked us in for fundraising later on, right? And so it was so cool. And I would report out, I do these, quarterly, monthly investor updates for our investors. We had a small group of investors. And the first metric I would say is like, how many logos do we have? And it started with 0. And for a while it was 0, and then it was 1. It was 2. And like, and then the team, we were shipping, building, we had to build and ship for this first company. It was all broken. Half the time we spent like in their office with their customer support agents, just riding along, seeing what they were doing. And we're like, oh crap, that's like completely broken. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, that was the energy. And it was like, launch day is coming, but the only thing that matters on launch day is our customers. And so that became this really cool rallying cry. And that was our 6 to 9 months. That was that 6 to 9 months, if you get what I mean. Right. And so the day of TechCrunch Disrupt comes, we feel, we've prepped both our pitch, our story. It was all about bringing this AI information into workflows, starting with customer service. And ironically, if you go back, like, our vision is basically the same as it is today. It's just we're actually doing it. And then we launched. And the thing I'm most proud of is like we had 6 logos on that slide.
Wow, you beat your own
We
goal.
beat our own goal. Let's
Fantastic.
go. That was amazing. We got our article, and we were one of the few AI companies like at Disrupt that year.
Yeah.
And
Keeping us ahead of the curve as well. Yeah. I mean, but you're beating around the bush here, Deon. You won TechCrunch Disrupt that year.
To mention, we did win TechCrunch Disrupt, which was phenomenal. It was amazing. Such a just a surreal experience.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it sounds like you did everything right, because it is my job now to train founders on said pitch and on the Q&A coaching, right? And I mean, to have the goal to have as many logos on your customer slide, on your traction slide as possible is honestly the best way to spend your time. Because then if you didn't win, at least you had 6 customers.
That's
not a bad day.
It's the opposite of like, cool, we have this great announcement, but are we delivering value? And so it all ends up becoming the win in many ways. And that's why I feel really proud to have launched at Battlefield. It was like the win itself, the experience, the other founders and companies we got to meet, but also like that focus, that team camaraderie. It's like, that's actually what you want to be creating, the environment you want to create for your company, again, every 6 to 9 months.
But so tell us, how did it feel to win? I mean, you guys raised your Series A round on the wake of your Battlefield win, right?
Yes. So yeah, it was like everything really came together, again, starting from like the customer pitch or the customer focus for the team. And then in addition, like us locking in our story, our vision, what it is, like bringing this concept of AI to customer experience first. And we kept saying that like our big vision is not just customer experience, but it's literally all of these workflows around business, around consumers, around customers. And again, we're like 7 years in and just starting to realize that vision, but like that's how you can see how big of a vision it was. Cool. And so yeah, we ended up winning, which felt amazing. But we also timed our Series A like kind of intentionally around it, because look, you can't tell. Like, there's mum's the word on who's launching. Nobody knows who's going to be a TechCrunch Disrupt until like the week of, basically.
We like to keep a secret.
It's good.
Keep people on their toes. What can I say?
On their toes. And so, but what we did was we knew that if we did well, if we won or were, at least top 5, that we would have a compelling fundraise story as well. And so we started meeting VCs and lining them up for the week of and after TechCrunch Disrupt. And they didn't know they were being lined up. It was, it was like, hey, yeah, like if you get an intro to a VC, it's like, yeah, cool, let's meet. I'm busy, but like, how about the week of September 5th or the September 12th, right? And so what happened was like we launched on stage, and then we had all these meetings, and these VCs were like, oh crap, like I'm meeting with Deon tomorrow, and then it became this like frenzy, intentionally, I guess. But then we used that to kick off our fundraising. Yeah, we raised a 9 million Series A like 3 weeks later.
Wow. I mean, what a better way there isn't a better way to use that momentum, right? I mean, I've heard founders in recent years also kind of using the platform similarly, right? It's that FOMO. It's to create investor FOMO is a very, very powerful thing. So last time we chatted, you were mentioning that maybe it was the Series A round that you raised after Disrupt, but that you were kind of chasing the metrics that they were looking for. No, it was between your Series A and your Series B, right? So it didn't quite have the metrics, but it was a hype round. And then it had to sort of chase the metrics to get to Series B. Tell us about that process.
Oh my gosh. All right, well, we're on podcast now, but like real talk. It's just so ironically, despite being able to raise so much money, there is a reasonable probability that if a founder in exactly that scenario were to come to me today and say, should I do it? I would tell them no. reason being, and like you see this all the time, like in the news, like you're reading the tech crunches, like you're literally, and you see the founder stories, you see the hype stories, right? And very rarely do you get the real. And the real is that, like, at the end of the day, your goal is to build a company of value that is enduring, and that is the venture game. Your goal is not to raise a lot of money and get hyped and get the cool VCs and like
Breach.
right, like
Honestly.
somehow company building was co-opted by like rock stardom, and people think that the rock stardom is the goal, right? And again, it goes back like thinking just that, like, is the goal to launch at TechCrunch Disrupt, or is the goal to deliver value for our customers? And TechCrunch Disrupt is the platform for that, right? And so the same is true for fundraising. Is the goal to raise a bunch of money at great valuations, or is the goal to be an enduring company? Because it's very easy, and we saw this in 2020, we saw this in 2021. It's very easy to, raise at gajillion dollar valuations when you're doing well, but then none of the founders talk about like, oh shoot, what happens when, like, you actually have to grow into that valuation. And so we raised our Series A, and mind you, like I said, we just had 6 pilot customers at the time, so effectively 0 ARR. Like, again, I'm like, I don't know, we're in podcast land. Y'all are, you get all the, like, the real here, right? Like, it's just, and I would not recommend that in many ways. And again, it worked out like in the end, but it was a painful working out, right? And so again, like, if I were to go back and advise my younger self, I probably could have argued, hey, raise a smaller seed right now and then continue the momentum and then go raise your Series A, right? And most Series A companies are, doing $1 million, $2 million in ARR back then. And now, who the heck knows what the heck is going on these days? But, and then you're like trying to do at least 5, 6, somewhere in that range for your Series B. And you're trying to like triple and double, triple, like continue that growth every round. And if you do that, you actually give up less dilution and all that. There is an irony, though, because companies that are able to raise early and at high valuations, there's actually some likelihood that there's a reason for that. Like, they're breaking out, there's something there. And so you can see why investors, again, in a low signal game, will take the bet. Like, yeah, I'll pay up now, because if you're going to be a $10 billion company, it kind of doesn't matter. But as a founder, you just have to really balance that. And so by the time we went to raise our Series B, we were kind of just barely catching up to our Series A metrics, but we were hitting them. Like, we were doing our thing. We hit another inflection point. COVID also started to impact that. We had just launched a new product in 2020. And so we were just starting to catch up to our Series A. And then we got preempted for our Series B. And I was like, oh, sick. That's great. Again, it's like, it's good. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. But like, if we were to sit down and have like a reasonable, like, mathematical argument, is that necessarily the best way to build a company? I am not entirely sure. But anyway, that is what we did.
But I mean, but it's true. That's in 2025, like the bar for metrics of companies, especially AI companies, is sky high compared to what it was just a few years ago. And I mean, customer success with AI, for example, is a very crowded space today.
It is
and
indeed.
not when you started necessarily, but
Actually, I would argue that it is equivalently crowded.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of my question, is like, what advice would you have for founders building in crowded spaces? But that gives you go tell us how it was back in the day.
I'd go off. All right. So customer service back then in like 2017, 2018, it was still a very weirdly competitive space, but it was competitive for different reasons. Like, it was flooded with these like kind of old school chatbots. You've probably interacted with like an airline or whatever, and you call and you're like, dial 1 for billing. And they press 2, like, you're like, I don't, but that was what the state of the art of AI for customer service was. And there were still dozens, hundreds of those companies at varying.
It's funny because those in my mind don't scream AI, right? That screams analog. Like, even though I know it's not, but like that's what it feels like. So it's interesting to conceptualize
was
them as
like,
AI.
guys, like, that's not AI.
Yeah.
And that was what was interesting. And part of why my pre-seed was so hard to raise was because I wasn't able to articulate that very well. I could see it because when we were talking to customers, what customers would say, like, I've tried 1,000 of them. They haven't worked. Are you sure yours works? Remember, like, that was what they were asking us. So the problem was there, but they weren't convinced on the solution. Investors, on the other hand, would say, there are 1,000 chatbot companies out there. Why would you start one? Like, that, literally, that was like every investor after investor after investor. And so the beauty, though, was that the conviction came from the customers again. And hopefully that's like this theme which was like, no, 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 no. Like, if you're on a mission to solve a problem for a customer, then your mission is only done once the problem is solved. And we're talking to people, like, we can see there's a huge pain point. And not only so, but the why us was like, what have they tried? The analog stuff. There wasn't anything that was using, the transformer models or neural networks or anything like that really out there. And so because we had this technological background, we thought, okay, this is where we can be better. And so that was our campaign, like, when we launched, and was always our messaging for many years. The market has shifted. So, 2022, GPT has been released. And so what we saw was, ironically, a bunch of our competitors fail to make the Gen AI leap because they were still using the old school analog. Like, there are companies that were doing 50 to 100 million of ARR on old school like decisions.
I mean, you can't blame them if they don't know any better. If they don't have a better solution.
That is it. Like, that was it. And so those were the competitors we were competing with pre-GPT. And then, like, kind of post-GPT, we saw them fizzle out because they were still, like, they didn't have the AI chops to then go and...
They got disrupted straight up.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So, like, some fell out of the playing field. They got acquired, or they, like, they just, like, we didn't see much of them. And then we saw new ones crop up who were Gen AI native. So, like, the net kind of pool of startups was the same in quantity, but then the competition raised because the bar started to get so much higher. Like, it wasn't enough just to have AI. You still had to build the best technology. Anyone could throw an LLM now, a transformer-based model, but can you build something that can take action? Can you build something that has the context on your business, isn't just responding with generic answers and all of that? So now the bar for great AI for customer service became so much higher, and then we continued to innovate. And so I would say, the last year and a half or 2 to 3, 6 to 9 month sprints was about innovating at the next level. And we continue to, it's in the name, we try to continue to have the forethought to do that. Now we're launching, we just launched our browser agent that allows you to, take action in the browser to solve customer support problems. We launched Forethought for Voice, so you can have a literal phone conversation with something that sounds pretty human as part of your customer service. And so it's like really just pushing that bar.
That's fantastic. And on behalf of people who have to call customer service regularly, thank you. Thank you. No, but honestly, Deon, I feel like you and I could probably chat all day, and this was a great excuse for us to hang out again. But I would love to, in the spirit of time traveling, what is next? So Forethought just closed your Series D earlier this year. You stepped down as CEO and into a chairman position.
Yeah.
And your co-founder is now CEO, right?
Yes. My co-founder, Sammy, is now our CEO. So in terms of what's next, like, I think there's a few things, right? So one, continuing to innovate on what is possible with AI. And it's so cool to see this because as I mentioned, my co-founder and I have completely different, like, leadership styles and ways of thinking. And we've always just kind of, like, run business in this way together, and just, like, leveraging these different superpowers. And I think in this new era for Forethought, again, we just launched it's all about new modalities, right? Where can you bring AI, whether, again, it's to the browser, whether it's to voice, launching an API, things like that. It's enterprise grade. And then I think the last piece is customer service is the beginning, but the goal is customer experience, right? You don't just interact with a business when you have a service question. You interact with a business when you're buying a product, when you're, being upsold in so many different ways, right? And all of these are the experience. So anyway, in the short, I think just, like, the sky's the limit. And yeah, I'm in this new chairman role, which is really exciting. And going back to my co-founder superpowers, what I found is, like, he is probably one of the single best operators I've ever seen, I've ever worked with. And my superpower is in thinking about the vision and in thinking about the storytelling of the company.
Well, this has been so much fun talking with you, Deon. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Build Mode is a TechCrunch podcast. Each episode is produced and edited by Maggie Nye and hosted by me, Isabel Johannesson. Our art and design is also by Maggie Nye. A big thanks to Morgan Little, who leads our audience development, the Foundry and Cheddar video teams, and most of all to you, the builders, and everyone else in the wider startup community. We'll see you back here next time.